Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. I am Lauren Morton.
And hey everyone, I'm Mollie Taylor.
And this week, Molly and I have invited on our executive editor on the US side, Tyler Wilde, to talk about the phenomenon, the contentious phenomenon of yellow paint on ledges. Does that sound really obscure? It does when you say it out loud, except I think a lot of people immediately get a picture in their head when you say that. This is a thing that comes up on social media just like every couple months, I think. It's definitely like a semi-annual topic at this point, is when usually like a third-person action game will have a climbing section somewhere in the middle. You take a break from whatever your normal stealthing, third-person shooting, adventuring business is, and you have to climb a cliff for some reason or another. You've got to get somewhere. Maybe sometimes you have to climb like some rickety wooden boards. And to show you where you need to climb, there will be some helpful just yellow paint. Who painted it yellow? We don't know. It's just sprinkled into the world to help you see which areas are climbable. And it causes some discourse on social media quite regularly of whether or not the yellow paint is necessary or sort of demeaning, or if it's absolutely necessary, as developers say, because they have to show you where to go. So we're kind of going to get into it a little bit with Tyler on whether we think it is actually necessary, whether it could be done better, which games have done it well, and which games have done it maybe in a more blatant fashion that we don't love. But before we get to all that, Molly, what did you play last week? Oh no!
Don't look at me.
Failures this week. We've
Don't
had a
look at
2-week
me.
streak of both being bad.
I've been bad. I have not really been playing anything. So like last week, if you listen to last week's episode, you will know I was kind of sick. And I did not have a voice basically for like 4 days. So I didn't really go on Discord. I wasn't really playing anything. I'm also in the middle of moving. So like that is consuming all of my brain and physical time and energy. And I'm finding it really hard to just like sit down and play and enjoy a fucking video game. Like I think it's because like everything is chaos right now, and I feel like when there's chaos, I cannot just like tell my brain, okay, we're just gonna like sit down and we're gonna play a game and we're gonna chill out. I can't do it. I can't like dedicate that brain power. I have to completely rot, essentially. I suppose technically I'm still playing my gacha game on my phone. I'm still playing Nikkei. If that counts. I guess it kind of does. It's a game of some capacity. But instead it's been a lot of watching YouTube videos on interior design, which is so boring. I'm not playing video games, and I'm hoping like, you know, in the next couple of weeks I will play some more video games, because I'm getting bummed out that I'm not playing any. I was doing so well at the start of the year. Dragon's Dogma has been suspended on my Steam Deck for like a week at this point. Yeah, and I've just not picked it back up, so fingers crossed. But I have started watching this TV show called Extraordinary, which is like a British like comedy about like how everyone gets powers. Everyone has powers except for the main character. She doesn't have a power, and she's feels really crappy about it. It's like that's a fun TV show. That's how I've been rotting. Not video games, just interior design and British television shows. That's me. What did you play, Lauren? Huh? What did you play? You play anything?
Okay, wait, no, I did play a little bit of video games. I will say that I took a bit of a long weekend myself, and I was away from home, and I did not bring my Steam Deck with me on this occasion. This was a long weekend that was not conducive to Steam decking, so I did not get to video game while I was away from home. I actually did more reading instead. And I did also fail again at my goal of playing something new each week. I did not play anything new last week. Big tragedy, big sad. But I did play The Sims 4, because I was playing that new DLC pack that they had come out, the Crystal Creations one, where you can like craft jewelry.
Yeah.
it's a little OP, man. It's a little OP. You can
That's it.
the gems, you craft quartz and jet and whatever else, all these things that people make in real life, and they are supposedly have healing powers, right? But in the Sims, they really do. They can boost your little moodlets. They can keep your social need from decaying. There's one that prevents you from dying. There's all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's in fact rather OP if you have because you can wear multiple, as you know, in the Sims, you can have multiple pieces of jewelry on at once. You can have a crafted set of earrings, a necklace, bracelets, multiple rings. So as I was checking this out for the first time, in live mode, which, as we know, I don't play a lot of live mode Sims. I'm a build girl all the way through, but I did it for this pack because it's big on gameplay. I loaded her up with special effects. She just was wearing the full gauntlet of cheat codes on her hand. Yeah, of no, you can't touch my mood. I am impervious to death and sadness forever. Which was fun and great. Actually, it was a good time. There's definitely some create a sim and buy mode stuff too. There's some new decor. It's all a little academia adjacent, lots of wood tones and brass kinds of stuff. It's cute. I like it. I'd say as a build person, I don't know if I having not gotten it in order to write about it, and I make decisions the way I normally would about buying Sims DLC packs, I probably wouldn't grab this one because I'm so focused on build mode. And I don't think there was enough new stuff in a style that I personally need and want to have grabbed it just for the build mode. The live mode stuff was fun. It was a lot of fun. I think it introduces some fun storytelling stuff. So I think that's most of what I did last week. I don't think I loaded up any new games. Let me one last time verify that I'm not lying about that.
Do a skim.
No, yeah, I didn't play anything new. Womp womp. I did bad.
Whoopsies.
That's okay.
That's fine.
That's fine. But with that out of the way, then let's go grab Tyler to talk about yellow paint. Yeah. Hey, Tyler. So you are joining us for a bit of reheated discourse, as it were, a sort of eternally lukewarm to be reheated bit of discourse that happens on gaming social media.
I think it's a new yearly one. We're adding it to the yearly discourse list. So
the schedule.
Probably, yeah, it's on the schedule. I think, maybe.
I think this is a bi-yearly one. I think that this is
every 6 months.
6 month. Yeah, this is a twofer. We get this. This comes up at least twice a year, I feel like.
That's exciting.
Winter yellow paint and summer yellow paint event.
Hopefully it's kicking something out of the schedule. Maybe we don't have to argue about difficulty options anymore if we're arguing about.
God. Tyler. Oh, Tyler.
No, it's not. That's what you're saying.
No.
In paradise, perhaps.
So we actually just even a few weeks ago, I feel like we had a conversation sort of like this. Molly, you and I always wind up picking topics like this for the podcast of the things that make everybody in our chat suddenly speak over each other in the work chat. Yeah. When all the work stops and everybody is just typing in Slack, that's when I know it should probably be something we talk about on the podcast. And this is, as you say, Tyler, a forever topic on social media and also for our team is if somebody brings it up, we are no better than anyone else and we will all litigate it. So it was a fierce competition. Morgan could have been here for this, Robin could have been here for this. And we were no, Tyler also. Tyler doesn't usually argue about things, but Tyler has feelings, so he needs to be here.
I do try to stay out of the discourse. The common discourse, because I feel like just because we've done it all before, if you've been on Twitter for a decade plus, which is, horrifying, you've had all these arguments. But this one, it's relatively fresh. It's it's kind of a mutation of previous arguments, but, at least it's something new to fight about.
So what brought it on this time was Final Fantasy VII, it sounds like.
Yes.
One of the new remake.
Rebirth. Yeah, Rebirth.
Whatever they named this part of it, I admit that I'm not keeping track very well.
Yeah, there were yellow ledges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yellow climbable ledges, which had sort of stirred up. Because I think the biggest I saw it before this is why I'm saying this is a bi-yearly special, is because I'm pretty sure in like when the Resi Evil 4 remake came out, the yellow crates made people very angry. People were not happy with the yellow crates. And I never seen kind of I had never seen so much attention drawn to the yellow paint on stuff until that moment, I think.
Yeah. So this is a thing that
Yep.
happens to like point out interactable stuff in a game. And when we're talking about yellow paint specifically, like there are lots of other visual design languages that are very repeatable. I mean, we could talk about like red barrels and have an entire episode about that probably, but yellow ledges specifically is, you know, these are the parts of a wall you can climb, and it usually happens in a third person action game. It happens in your Resident Evils, your Tomb Raiders, your Uncharted's, your like whatever else typically, right? When you get to that climbing section, the thing that the game is not entirely about, but it's in there and it's part of the adventure. And so we got to make sure everybody just gets through it and it's not too intense. You're just going to climb up the ledge and look, you can see exactly where you're going to climb, because the ledges just kind of have yellow paint on them. Why is it yellow paint? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I think that's what bothers people, right? Is that it's kind of like, why does it have to always be like just like yellow paint dripping down a rock face? Why is this?
Yeah, I think the argument is about the argument to a degree, and like,
yeah,
it's because there's a bigger idea of like, oh, games these days, they make them just too simple, too easy, too handholdy, that they, you know, over pamper players and don't let them figure out anything for themselves, which I think you could argue is true in some places. And then there are obvious, you know, counter examples like From Software's games. But you know, that sort of argument gets mixed in with all sorts of other ideologies and beliefs, and then the counter argument is almost can become really objectionable too, I think, when it's just like, well, actually they tested this and players are all stupid and they can't figure it out. And you go, well, wait a minute. Like I feel like I can figure things out. So does it have to be yellow paint, or could there be some more subtle like lighting tricks or something? No, it has to be yellow paint. And then you end up with like, you know, as with all debates like this, the sort of argument ends up being distilled to the people like most willing to trade blows, you know, over the two ends. And then everyone else kind of goes, oh, I feel like yellow paint's okay sometimes, but yeah, maybe it is kind of not the best, you know, thing. So everyone in the middle ends up, you know, either being pushed to some extreme or, you know, they end up stop talking about it. So I think like, you know, even like our own Slack conversations, at the end of it, we all go, I think we all agree that we don't care this much, but it was good to fight it out.
That's what I said to you as we were getting ready to talk about this, was that I think the tragic thing is that this is one of those arguments that lives best in a Twitter thread, because as you say, it's adopted by people who are most willing to just assume like the idiocy of another person and then argue at each other back and forth. And the truth is, when you put any three of us in the room, like, yeah, we were like going off about it in our group chat, but then you put three of us in a room and sit down and talk about it, and the reality is that actually we all just kind of agree and are sort of in the middle. But
I think
go ahead.
I just think one of the key things is the type of game we're talking about here, because you put it really well, Lauren, when you were setting this up, and you said these are the kind of games, they aren't about the climbing on ledges, or that this is like an activity you have to do while it loads the next area, basically, right? Like these aren't games. This isn't like a mountain climbing game, and they're going like, oh, they ruined the mountain climbing game by putting yellow paint on all the handholds. Like these are third-person action adventure games where the climbing and maneuvering is kind of incidental. It's just supposed to sort of feel good and get you to the next, area where there's action. So I think with that context, like it kind of matters less to me how developers like signpost, where to go, versus if this was a game where I'm supposed to feel like I'm getting actually lost in the wilderness, it would be really annoying if it's like, oh, but someone dripped paint all over the place I'm supposed to go. But that I don't really play these kind of third person action games where it's supposed to be kind of like movie like and move you from scene to scene in that way. So, I don't really need to have an opinion on how they design that.
Yeah.
Mollie, have you had any one of these that felt particularly egregious to you as you're playing?
See, like I say, I don't think it's something that ever really stuck out to me, I guess, until I saw how mad people were about it with the Resi 4 remake. I don't know. It's never really been something that has super bothered me. I guess I also don't play a ton of action games, so maybe that's where that comes from, but I don't know. I'm stupid. I'm stupid. I need.
That's
this
not
stuff.
allowed to be your refrain this year. You're banned.
It's my get out of jail card for everything. It's just I'm stupid. But I don't know. I think I can understand both sides, right? I understand that if there's a game where you want a lot of immersion, where you want to feel like you're really in that world, and then no one in reality is going around and painting fucking giant circles on barrels and climbing up ledges with a can of paint and a paintbrush and painting them as they climb so other people know, right? Obviously that's just not something. So I kind of get it from the immersion breaking standpoint, and then I do understand it from the developer standpoint of sometimes these things get added because segments that were lacking in a sort of visual communication were playtesting poorly. But I do agree with you, Tyler, that maybe there's more subtle ways that it could be done, right? But again, like I say, I'm very stupid. It has never been something that has really stood out to me as something that irritates me, I guess.
I think it's really easy for these conversations to get broader because as you're both talking about it, and as I know, the two big pieces of arguments that happen back and forth about this, about whether or not it's necessary, I'm all of a sudden now thinking about, the conversations that people love to have on social media of nobody has media literacy anymore, or on the book side of social media, it's everything is marketed with tropes now and nobody understands how to actually talk about the plot of a book. And it's the same thing about movies, and nobody is willing to have morally great characters. And those are just things people love to argue about. And maybe some of it's true, but a lot of it isn't true. And I think, Morgan, as we were talking about this among ourselves, said that the disappointing thing is when developers come back and say, obviously it's this way because people couldn't understand, otherwise they wouldn't know where to go. And Morgan's it feels dismissive. It feels yes, we know that you need to show us where to go. We know that. But why is it always yellow paint though? Why is it always the exact same visual communication language? Why is it not slightly more subtle? Why is it not whatever? And the answer is probably, as some people post out, pointed out on social media, and both of you are saying, this stuff gets focus tested out. And the issue is that this gets put in front of players. And if it's not immediately comprehensible, if they struggle for half a second, decisions come top down that say we need to eliminate that half a second of them not understanding what's going on, instead of letting you have I'm not going to pull the Mollie and I'm not going to say I'm stupid, but I do in certain settings. It takes me a second with certain games, before I develop the muscle memory and the memory for the visual cues. I do have a little bit of friction with each new game I pick up, and for me that's okay. But when you're looking in a playtesting setting, yeah, I think the need to optimize out any feeling of confusion is how this happens.
Yeah, I think Also, even if there isn't a focus test, obviously I'm not a game developer at a big studio, so not speaking from experience, but I imagine it's just part of the reason this debate is so big is that we've just like hit on something that's really difficult in game design, and almost every game has to do it, has to get a player from point A to point B, wants there to be some friction because you don't want to just like walk there in a straight line, but doesn't want there to be so much friction that people get frustrated and turn the game off, right? So that is a design challenge that when I think about it, in every iteration of what a game can be and the kind of movement it can have, like that sounds really difficult. And I think what people are identifying with yellow paint is the shortcut, the like, I got to find a way to do this. I'm going to put yellow paint here. And I think I think it's fair to react to that and go, yeah, this feels kind of like not the best way to do this. And I understand why some developers would be defensive too, because, hey, this wasn't like the main priority thing that I had to do. We had to build all these other systems, like quit harping on the freaking yellow paint, which, I mean, as writers, I mean, none of us here can say that we've never like written a segue that was kind of clunky,
boring, and overused. Yeah.
just had to get to the next freaking paragraph, just had to get to the next point,
All that's
read it
to
back.
Say, delete that from your draft.
But yeah. So like, I'm just saying, like, I get why if someone came to me and was like, hey, the segue between like the first part and second part of your article kind of was clumsy and sucked, I'd be like, why are you picking on me, man? I only had an hour to write that. I'm freaking busy. Leave me alone. So I get the defensiveness from some developers, but I think it is also fair to say, like, hey, I think just to observe that the yellow paint it does feel kind of like a bit of a cheap gimmick to like go like, I couldn't figure out a better way to like get the player over here, so I put some paint on it. Like, I think it's okay to admit that, hey, sometimes you just got to do the like, quick and dirty solution.
Yeah. Like, hey, did you enjoy the rest of the big action game cinematic experience? Okay, then leave me alone about the yellow paint. Yeah, like you say, I kind of identify with that feeling.
I feel like part of what it is as well, right, is more than any other medium, I would say, you have to cater your communication to such a wide audience, right? In a movie or in a book, you can put like a trope, or you can put some kind of point in it, and if the person reading or watching the movie doesn't understand, it's not as big a deal, I guess, as if you don't understand something that's being communicated to you in a video game, right? Because it's something you're actively interacting with. And in a movie, if the thing that's being communicated to you, you don't get it, that moment passes, right? In a video game, if the thing that's being communicated to you does not register in your brain, you're not going to progress. Like, the moment won't pass until you do understand it, right? And I think that's probably like, I could not imagine having to be in that situation where it's like, okay, you've got this person and it's their first ever video game, and you've got to make them understand the same way you've got to make like this guy over here who's been playing games since they came out of the womb. Like, how do you make them both understand the thing that you're trying to say, right? And there are some games, I think, did you like Jody mentioned that like the Tomb Raider like reboot in 2013 had like a white paint that it would use to mark important stuff, and you could turn that off, I think he said.
Yeah, Jody said this is a solved problem.
Yeah, I've seen a few people on Twitter say the same thing. Yeah, there should just be a yellow paint slider. Yeah, which is kind of funny, but
how obvious.
But I think then the problem there might be if you've designed a game in such a way that it sort of needs yellow paint, then turning off the yellow paint probably won't be, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like games which have yellow paint or white paint, whatever it may be, it's there because without it, there was some deficiency in communication, right? So removing it doesn't add a better way to sort of signify where to go, but it is a funny idea, I think.
You're right though, Mollie, that like the consequences or the risks of communicating poorly or of having friction in a game are so much higher. Like the rate of failure is really high when you're talking about something interactive, right? That's really important because yeah, in a book or a movie or anything else, if there's a part that like went over your head or you didn't get, the annoying consequences, you're watching that movie with a person who is one of those people that likes to ask questions and say, wait, who is that person? And you say, shut up and keep watching. And in a video game, that is not the solution to the problem. You get stuck and you can't progress, which is
what I think has, like, again, when this argument really gets going and people start to sort of imagine the most extreme positions their opponents could be taking, what gets people upset, I think, in part is the idea that, you know, big game studios and big publishers are trying to design out all friction in games and just make these perfectly smooth experiences where nobody is ever stuck for more than a millisecond, right? Because we've like focus tested out all the friction. And, you know, the reality, I think we all know that that actually isn't the way to go, right? That wouldn't be a very fun thing. I don't think it's true that big studios are trying to, you know, make perfectly frictionless games. I think they are also smart people who think about game design and make interesting stuff. But that is sort of the fear that I think underpins this whole conversation. You know, but sort of anytime someone brings up this sort of extreme apocalyptic, like, you know, all friction is being removed scenario, you can easily just start picking up counter examples of like games that are full of friction. You know, Baldur's Gate 3, really hard game.
Starting Baldur's Gate 3, oh my god.
Who doesn't, if you don't know D&D, like, my god, like that's a ton of friction, really hard. Of course, you know, from software, obviously. So the idea that, like, I don't even play the games we're talking about here, and there's like so many other games for me to play, you know, so these sort of like, they tend to be sort of like console focused action games that we're talking about here. Like, I didn't see any yellow paint in Baldur's Gate 3, which, and there were times I got stuck in that game trying to figure out, like, how do I get down to that ledge? Where's like the thing I have to click, the climbable thing I have to click? And, you know, I'm glad they didn't go the yellow paint route there. But obviously, you know, it's a very different kind of game, and sort of like exploring its world and kind of like, realizing like, I can jump up onto this ledge I didn't know I could. That is part of the fun in a way that I don't think it really is supposed to be in these third-person action games, like I said, where you're just trying to get to the next part of the game or whatever.
An interesting example from just last year actually was Jusant, the game that is entirely about climbing. Because as you mentioned, Tyler, like usually we're talking about games where the problem that this solution is an answer to is for a segment of the game that is very transient, very quick, not the focus of the game. Jusant, climbing is the entire focus of the game. It's all about mountain climbing. And in fact, it does have some sections that have like painted ledges in it. It's not super egregious, but I did remember I was in that game and I was like, really? Interesting. In the game that has many other solutions for telling you where to climb, because there are lots of different climbable things. There are plants that you climb. There are like just structures of wood, all sorts of stuff. And I was like, even in this game that has so clearly distilled the act of climbing, that's the entire point. They've done so many things that are great here, like the experience of climbing in Jusant. Like, I put that on one of my favorite lists of the year. Like, Morgan fought for that really hard in our game of the year discussions. Like, it's so great. And even that, I wish I could remember exactly where it gets used, but I do just remember it kind of stopping me in my tracks, as it were, and going, even here, even here. Like, they even Jusant, the game that is fantastic and does climbing so well, like, went with the painted ledge solution in at least some parts. So it does kind of break out. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't even know if I was mad about it. I was just surprised. It caught my attention. Yeah, it was very memorable just because of the context around this conversation coming up, as you say, biannually.
The discourse distracting you from playing a game you like. You were forced to think about Twitter while playing the game, and it just ruined the immersion. That's the real problem here. That's what we should be discussing. We've got to get off Twitter. We got to get off TikTok because it's just, it's frying our brains. That's the issue.
Like, I think about, how games used to be and kind of how they are now. And I remember, like, kind of visual communication used to be way more egregious, I feel like. I feel like we kind of went on, like, a little curve, right? Like, in the beginning, what the fuck? You weren't told shit. It was like, play this game. It's 20 minutes long, but it's going to take you, like, 8 hours to finish because we're not going to tell you anything. And then I feel like we kind of entered this era of, like, the giant 3D arrow at, like, the top of the screen that would, like, point and rotate to your next objective. Or, like,
what's your problem with Crazy Taxi?
Yeah, like the Crazy Taxi arrow that would direct you to your next objective. Or, like, the trails that would, like, you wouldn't have to look at anything. You would just look at this, like, line or this, like, little fairy dust line. I think Fable did that. Had, like, this, like, fairy dust kind of trail that you would follow to the next location. And I think maybe part of this kind of friction again has come from, like, an increase in like a push for more realistic games, I guess, more immersive games. When I think of a game that kind of did, it wasn't Yellow Paint. When I think of a game that did kind of this sort of visual communication really well, I always think of the runner's vision from Mirror's Edge, where, like, it would just highlight shit in red. It'd be like, that pipe over there, like, it's red, you can walk on it. Or, like, boxes that you could jump off or walls that you could, like, run off would all be highlighted in red. And it was like, I think the thing that made that work so well was that it was actively integrated into the visuals of that game, right? The game was, like, almost entirely white. It had these little pops of color, and then the runner's vision was red. And you could switch that off as well. Like, if you did not want to use that was something that you could turn off. And I always think that was quite a cool way to go about it.
I've never played Mirror's Edge, Molly, but as you're talking about that, the thing that makes me really curious is whether it's actually solving the same problem or not. In Mirror's Edge, when they give you the runner's vision, is the act of, like, parkour in Mirror's Edge about executing on timing, or is it about identifying the thing that you need to go to? Because I think when we talk about Yellow Paint, the like, mental process that we're, like, shortcutting is identifying the thing that you need to go to. And in Mirror's Edge, is it? Okay, so it's not, like, just about, like, see and respond quickly, and it's not actually taking the respond quickly action away from you?
No. So it's basically, like, stuff that you can climb, stuff that you can, like, use to parkour with will be highlighted red, and then you kind of use that. And it's never the quickest way. It's just kind of the way that the game shows you that you can go. But like I say, you can turn that off and you can experiment, and there are, like, other places that you can end up utilizing and to make your kind of run across each level faster. So it is, like, used as, like, a visual identification, because so much of Mirror's Edge is, like, just a white, it's like white buildings, white pipes, white everything. So
yeah, I wonder if more games. Well, I feel like. I wonder if more games need to get comfortable with the concept of like a, not like X-ray vision, but, like, highlight vision, because there are lots of third-person action games that do use this concept. Like The Witcher uses it in certain quests where you like, click in your stick, or if you're using a keyboard, I'm sorry, I do actually use a controller for most games, especially third-person action games. The Witcher does it. Horizon Zero Dawn does it, and Horizon Zero Dawn uses white paint instead of yellow paint for its ledges specifically. And I hope I'm not wrong about that. That's what I remember. And there are definitely other games, like Hitman uses that, but, like, kind of for a different purpose. And it's reminding me of like CRPGs, classic RPGs, and adventure games, where usually your left control is the highlight interactable objects button, right? And so it is by default not taking the search away from you, but it does give you a button for the like just tell me what to look at button, basically. And the reality is that if you play those games, you walk around and this part of your hand is pressed on the control key at all times.
Constantly.
Yes. That is the
all
posture.
The time. That's worse, I feel like.
Maybe it is. And as I'm describing it, maybe that's actually worse. If they give you a thing and you want it so constantly that you press it at all times, maybe that's bad too.
Mm-hmm.
But
that does seem questionable. Yeah.
Mollie,
you mentioned earlier.
Go for it, Tyler. Go for it.
No, you just mentioned like fidelity, like graphical fidelity, realism being an issue, and that you do see that, I think, like when you go back to when like the N64 came out and suddenly they started making 3D platformers, they were still basically the same sort of design ideas as 2D platformers, but now 3D. So you have all these platforms and you can like just jump up to them. And if you see a platform, you can kind of get there. So I feel like you didn't really need the yellow paint because you weren't trying to. But now with these like big budget action games, like the reason you have to go to a specific spot to get to the next place is because they have all these like bespoke animations, motion captured, climbing, looking cool, getting up to this ledge, right? You can't just like bounce around and bounce up to the next level, right? So I think that is a big part of why this is a phenomenon, is because these games are not, Donkey Kong 64, they're not Mario 64.
They're not sandboxes. They're highly scripted.
Yeah, like you have to go trigger a particular animation, and maybe like as procedural animation gets more advanced, I don't know, maybe you'll have more like Assassin's Creed style systems just kind of like stuck in games that aren't about parkour, so you can just have Nathan Drake or whoever climb up whatever ledge and you won't need yellow paint. But I think that the middle ground is like, we have to get players right here so that the animation works on this particular ledge.
Kratos has to reach the edge at this very specific point that we have sculpted. Right. So his hand comes away when the rock crumbles and then it leads into this exact cutscene. Yeah.
I do agree with what you both kind of said earlier as well about it kind of often being used for portions of games where it is not the defining feature of that game, right? Like, I have not played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I do not know why Cloud is climbing up a random ledge that's painted yellow. I don't fully understand the concept of that. And maybe that means that we should stop relying on these tropes. Because I do feel like, again, if you, like you say, Tyler, if you have to point something out, then maybe you're going kind of wrong somewhere. I know there's like there are necessary tropes, right? There are necessary ways to piece games together and to make sure that things flow in a correct way, right? But I think maybe we can start coming up with more inventive ways. And I feel like part of the problem as well sometimes, especially with like this yellow paint on ledges, is like, I understand it's so that you're not checking every single ledge to see if you can climb it. Maybe we need an extreme situation. Maybe we just need, you can climb every ledge or you can climb no ledge.
Full Breath of the Wild. Let's go. Everybody put in a stamina ring that's green and we can start yelling about that instead.
Yep. Either you can climb it, you can climb everything in the game, or you can climb nothing in the game. That's what we need.
I like that. That's it. That's the solution. I think we've just found it.
Yep, just black or white. That's all it is.
I do wonder about the Final Fantasy bit, because we expect Nathan Drake and Lara Croft and every Assassin's Creed character to be climbing up buildings and rock faces, and then when they get to the top of them, we have this pano shot of a beautiful scene, or it's just like a thing they do on the regular because they're like adventurers. But why is Cloud Strife climbing why is that?
Yeah.
Is that a thing he does? I don't feel like that's a thing
I
he
don't
does
think
very
that is a thing
often.
that he does. No,
But
but
kind of
actually, I'm really glad you bring up Tomb Raider, because I was trying to think, how did they like telegraph in the earlier games like stuff that you could utilize? And I do now have like very distinct memories of like Lara doing that like little jumping animation as I like attempted to see if like a wall was climbable in it, and it wasn't. I have like memories of just her like doing this up a
but
wall now.
in defense of
wasn't
paint.
doing that for 20 minutes and then finally finding the place you can climb, wasn't that part of the fun? Maybe. I don't know. I think part of what I sort of come down on the side of making fun of yellow paint mainly, but again, this is where the argument becomes about the argument and not actually about yellow paint. Just because I get annoyed by people who get mad that you made fun of the yellow paint, because I feel like we have to be allowed to if we can't make fun of like yellow paint in the same way we used to make fun of like, oh, every barrel is red and explodes or whatever. We got to be able to make jokes about these like cliches, right? And I feel like the like I don't know, the response of just like, why are you being a baby about this? It's the yellow paint is necessary. I'm like, all right, I don't know. I think we can make fun of the yellow paint and it's okay. It's okay. I appreciate that designing games is really difficult. But it is also funny that we're slapping yellow paint on ledges so that Cloud knows where to go. And in that screenshot, it doesn't even really look. It kind of looks almost like in a like survival crafting game, how you would be like, oh, there's like ore here. There's valuable. I don't know if you guys like have the screenshot pulled up, but doesn't it kind of look like Cloud should pull out a pickaxe and start like chipping off some gold?
It kind of does a
going and
little bit,
looking.
yeah.
Oh, I see exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It's like if you saw that from a distance, you'd be like, oh man, I got to go over there. I got to go over there and get some valuable materials for crafting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely, again, like I said, it's got to be hard trying to make your game kind of speak the same language no matter who's playing it. And I can definitely maybe understand the frustration if you're kind of a seasoned gamer and you boot up like the 10th game of the year and someone's just been going at the world with a paintbrush. Like, and I can imagine that it's frustrating. Like I said, it's something that like I never really perceive. It's something that just never like has bothered me, I guess. Like, I don't know.
What examples do we have of like stuff being pointed out in a way that felt really good, and crucially, difficultly, if it was done well and you didn't hate it, you may not remember it, and that might be
it's the
part
thing
of
is you just don't notice it when it's really subtle. But you would notice it if you just. I'm trying to think now of places where it didn't work and I just got stuck in the same area for a decade. But
I got stuck in part of Jusant, and it wasn't for lack of yellow paint. It was like a grapple point I was looking for that I missed. But I was stuck in Jusant for about 20 minutes and was part of the issue that I was talking to my friends on Discord while I was playing, and my full attention was not on the game. Our attention span's worse than they've ever been in kids these days. I am kids, maybe. That might be part of the problem.
I remember now getting stuck in Portal 2, and I can't remember. There was just like somewhere like really high up that I was supposed to kind of recognize I had to shoot a portal, and I couldn't tell you the exact part of it. But Portal 1, it would have been, unless you were literally stuck on a puzzle, which is the point, it would have been hard to not know where to go, right? Because it's literally like a series of test chambers that you move through. You can't kind of get lost in that game. But Portal 2, they opened it up, and I think there was definitely potential for getting a little bit more lost in that game. But, that's a case where they used the concept in order to like get around some of these problems, right? Like they set their game in a laboratory environment where you're going to have wall markings and paintings telling you where to go. And now that, I think about it more, right? so many games use these kinds of settings. Like when you're in Prey and you're on a space station, and space stations, Dead Space 2, all kinds of other games that take place in these kind of like military or industrial constructions that in the real world have signage and painted floors that tell you where to go. So it's kind of interesting to think about how, maybe game designers gravitate toward environments that
pre-excuse the thing that they know they're going to need to do.
Whereas, I mean, of course, there are games that take place in the exact opposite, like a jungle, right? That's the exact opposite of like something that is structured and labeled. So I'd be curious to go back and like play like Crisis or something and be like, how did you figure out where to go? I don't remember. I think it was pretty obvious because it was just like, where the guys were shooting at you. That is also a common way to let you know where to go.
One of the things that as we were having this conversation among the entire team, somebody pointed out a thread of examples from one Joe Wintergreen on Twitter/X of sort of similar design conventions, not always ledges, but like one was from Half-Life 2 of boards that are breakable, pointing out like there's a specific way that they look. They're not a different color. They just have a different shape to them. Or in Uncharted 4, where the ledges are like kind of distressed looking ones that you can climb, but it's not literally dripping yellow paint. It's the same thing, but slightly more subtle in a way that doesn't feel like it's yelling at you, "Hey, stupid," the whole time.
Yeah, that particular example does feel like, they just kind of, it looks like there's almost a little spotlight on each ledge. Seems to work.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other particularly good examples, but like, as you guys say, it's so tough when the good examples are the ones that are not memorable for
one that everyone
that reason.
Can relate to being annoyed when it's not done well. That Joe Wintergreen mentions here is doors that are unopenable. Like, I feel like throughout the history of games, like, I don't know, everyone's had this experience of walking up to a door and getting your character close to it and then realizing and having that moment of realizing, oh, this is the flat texture of a door that's just part of the wall and not one that opens, but only after like pressing the button like 3 times and being like, God damn it. Like if you played any GTA or anything, especially if you were a kid, say, and just being disappointed that none of the doors opened. But yeah, he points out that like Left 4 Dead did that well, but Left 4 Dead 2 introduced like some doors that open. And that meant now you kind of have to check every door because you're not sure which one's open. So it's a tough problem to solve for sure.
Like being a woman shopping for pants and trying to figure out which ones have the fake pockets on them that don't actually. There's no pocket in that
you see
pocket.
like a blazer and you're like, oh, cool. And you see the little flaps for a pocket, and then you lift the flap up and there's just
wrong. Non-functional.
Not an experience I've had. I'm just like,
must be
lousy
nice.
with pockets everywhere.
Must be nice. But
It
I
really
think
is.
I don't know if there's like a solution, like a one size fits all solution, because I feel like that's kind of the thing with paint, right? Is like it's something that you can kind of slap on anything in a lot of your games, and it will
literally and figuratively.
you can slap that on, but maybe there's like, I think that thread that you mentioned, Lauren, a lot of the, and what I say about Mirror's Edge is a lot of the examples that got brought up is they fit thematically and visually with the world, right? And I think there's still a line you have to draw there. Like, you don't want it to be so subtle in a way where someone who is like, your game is the first game they've ever played, they're not going to realize that you're subtly communicating that, but in a way that is also not just putting paint on something. Like I'm fine with yellow paint. I think I've made that clear by now. Like, I'm fine with it. I've never found it particularly immersion breaking. But I still think there's always better ways that we can all be doing everything, right? video games are still kind of so new and evolving so rapidly that I think there's always kind of problems cropping up in how to communicate things, and yellow paint won't be forever.
I want to say I don't have a problem with it, but when you said the words immersion breaking, I was like, oh wait, but I did give an example where seeing the yellow paint literally broke my immersion. And as Tyler said, suddenly I was thinking about Twitter instead of about Jusant. It unfortunately very truly broke my immersion in a tragic way, but not so much the yellow paint itself as the full context of the yellow paint.
It might be something that this very discourse kills off because of that, right? Because a lot of developers use social media. They read this stuff. They get involved in these conversations. Maybe they defended yellow paint, or maybe they said, no, here's better ways to do it. Whatever the case, anytime now someone is designing a game and going, we need to get players over here, let's make it yellow, they're going to think about Twitter too, and they're going to be like, do we want to do we want that discourse around this? Let's make it blue paint. Let's go ahead.
Are we providing the very ammunition needed in that meeting of 5 people where we say, no, we're mocking up designs for our ledges, and it's like, no, we're not going to do the yellow paint ones. We're gonna go with something different this time. This is your argument.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, Mollie said it. Yellow paint is not forever. So, yeah.
Were red barrels not forever? Do we not have red barrels anymore? I don't think we do.
You don't see them as much. Yeah.
I think they have symbols on them now a lot of the time. I think the symbol is usually the giveaway.
Which, case in point, is less egregious than all of them being red. And Mollie, as you pointed out, I think is probably a benefit of the level of fidelity that we have now, because in the N64, the mid 90s era, you could not have put, I mean, you could, but like just like a symbol on a barrel telling you which ones are explosive. No. You would need to be able to clock that from 100 paces. It's got to be red. and these days, maybe it can't just have a symbol.
What's funny is that the question isn't like, should games still have exploding barrels? It's like, what color should the exploding barrels be? And I think it would be funny if in 10 years they're still making those, like, you have to climb up 3 ledges to like get to the next area while the open world loads. If like that's still the issue, is like, well, yeah, we're still doing that. It's just a question of what color paint we use to tell people how to get there.
Guaranteed. We're not getting rid of climbing.
No, games change so much. They've changed so much, but you can also look back and be like, they haven't changed that much at all. Like, we're still concerned about like a lot of the same things. But anyway, I think that's what makes this conversation interesting, is that it's like, this has been an issue in game design since the start. How do you tell players where they can and can't go? And like, it's just interesting to see all the different ways people have approached it and continue to approach it and continue to grapple with this problem, and maybe fail or succeed, and or find paths that are somewhere in between. Anyway, I think it's a really interesting conversation, wherever you fall on yellow paint itself.
Yeah.
But just for the sake of, not being wishy-washy, I'm just going to come down on a hard no on yellow paint. I don't want to see it. No more. The discourse has happened. It has to go.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to be a hard no on the yellow paint, because you're right that games are not actually going to change that much. We still have the explosive barrels, and 10 years from now, we're still going to have climbing sections in between action beats, for sure. They're always going to be there, but I think we should evolve into some other thing. I don't care what it is, as long as it's not paint. Maybe it's going to be little flags. Maybe it's going to be specific, notches in walls or cliffs. I don't know, but it'll be
little, just kind of like flies buzzing around. That sometimes that kind of thing. Okay, that usually signifies like a dead body, though. So maybe not that.
Mollie, where do you come in at the very end of this conversation? Are you still a yay for paint?
I'm apathetic. I feel like yellow paint is good for my silly little brain that sometimes just wants to play games and not have to think too hard about them. And I can also appreciate perhaps the difficulties in communicating subtly, because not everyone does subtlety too great.
True.
So yeah, like I think I don't, like I said, yellow paint's not forever. I do not care quite. If that changes, I'll come back to you. But I think for now, just deal with it.
You're going to have a transformative yellow paint experience soon. I can feel it. You're going to be playing a game and you're going to see it and you're going to go, no, the yellow
Dragon's
paint.
Dogma 2 is gonna have it all something. That Dragon's Dogma 2 is somehow going to put like yellow paint on a cliff.
Imagine.
And I'm gonna change my mind.
No. Well, congratulations, guys. We've done it again. We've solved a game design problem here in this chat between three people who don't design games.
You're
for
welcome,
a living.
game devs.
Yeah, you're welcome. We did it.
We really
As
don't
usual.
get enough thanks for fixing all their problems, you know.
I know, right?
We'll make this a GDC talk maybe this year and throw them a bone, help them out.
How 3 journalists solved yellow paint. You're welcome, game devs.
Game devs hate this one trick. Sorry, we appreciate all of you.
Yes, all jokes, of course. Well, thank you both for trying to hash this out with us. As usual, if you want to hear us talk about more things that are or are not yellow paint related, you can find all the usual news, reviews, opinions, guides, all that good stuff on pcgamer.com. And you will be able to talk with Mollie and I about this week's episode at forums.pcgamer.com. Thank you guys both. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.